The two cloaked figures disappeared into the darkness. Neither Elias nor Adrian noticed, but Captain Roland did. Hidden atop a nearby rooftop, the commander of the Royal Guard watched the strangers vanish into a narrow alley. His expression darkened. "They're not ours." One of the hidden guards landed silently beside him. "Orders, Captain?" "Keep 4 men on His Highness." "What about the Duke?" Roland looked toward Adrian and Elias, who were slowly walking along the riverside. "Protect him too." The younger guard blinked. "The Duke? If His Highness has chosen him as his mate," Roland smiled faintly, "then he is already under the king's protection." The next morning, the noble council gathered inside Blackwood Manor. Adrian stood before a long table where 7 influential nobles waited. Lord Harrington, the oldest among them, spoke first. "The House of Ashford has accepted your proposal." Adrian frowned. "I never made one." "It was understood." "I understand no such thing." Another council member leaned forward. "Your Grace, you are the head of one of the most powerful noble houses in the kingdom. You cannot marry beneath your station." The room fell silent. Marcus, standing near the doorway, already knew where the conversation was heading. Lord Harrington continued, "We have prepared a list of suitable candidates." He slid several portraits across the table. Daughters of dukes, princesses, even an imperial niece. Adrian barely glanced at them. "I have already met my mate." The council members exchanged uneasy looks. "So the rumors are true." "A bookstore Omega. A commoner." Lord Harrington sighed heavily. "Your Grace." "A mate bond is a blessing, but a duke must think beyond his own happiness." Adrian remained silent. "You are expected to lead." "Your marriage is a matter of state." The words echoed in his mind long after the meeting ended. Meanwhile, Elias spent another peaceful morning in the bookstore. He smiled as he shelved a collection of fairy tales. Mr. Rowan looked at him over the rim of his glasses. "Something tells me yesterday wasn't just dinner." Elias laughed. "It was only dinner." You don't believe me. I've lived long enough to recognize the face of someone who's beginning to fall in love." Elias lowered his eyes. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone who's been there before." Mr. Rowan smiled warmly. "Love is a wonderful thing when people don't let pride ruin it." Those words lingered in Elias's heart. That afternoon, Adrian returned, but something was different. The warmth in his silver eyes had faded. His shoulders were tense, even his scent carried the sharp edge of inner conflict. Elias noticed immediately. "Is everything all right?" Adrian hesitated. "Can we talk?" Mr. Rowan quietly disappeared upstairs without saying a word. The bookstore suddenly felt much larger, much quieter. Adrian stood beside the window. "I've spent my entire life serving my house. I know I've never questioned my responsibilities." Elias waited patiently, "But meeting you," Adrian let out a slow breath, "changed everything." Hope flickered inside. "Elias, so what are you saying?" Adrian closed his eyes. "My council will never accept this." Elias's smile slowly disappeared. "They expect me to marry for politics. They expect me to strengthen alliances. They expect me to think like a duke." Silence. "I've tried," Adrian admitted quietly. "I truly tried to find another answer." Elias's voice was barely above a whisper. "And did you?" Adrian couldn't meet his eyes. "No." The single word shattered the silence. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then, Adrian forced himself to continue. "You deserve someone who can give you everything I cannot." Elias looked at him, searching his face. "Is that what you really believe?" "It has to be." "No," Elias shook his head. "Slowly, that's what you've convinced yourself to believe." Adrian's hands tightened into fists. "If I follow my heart, I risk my family's future. If you ignore your heart," Elias replied softly, "well, you'll lose something you'll never find." Again, for the first time in years, Adrian had no answer. Elias smiled. It was a gentle smile, kind but filled with quiet sadness. "I think we should stop here." Adrian looked up. "What?" You've already made your choice. Elias, I won't ask you to choose me. His voice never broke. I promised myself that if I found my mate, I would never become someone he was forced to love. He stepped closer. So I'll make the decision. Easier for both of us. He bowed. Politely. Thank you for the wonderful memories. Adrian, then he walked past him. The little brass bell above the bookstore door rang once, and then silence. Adrian didn't follow. His wolf howled inside him. Every instinct screamed to stop him, but Adrian stood frozen, watching the man he loved disappear into the crowd. Outside, Captain Roland had witnessed everything. His expression was colder than winter. He quietly summoned one of the hidden guards. Prepare the carriage. We're returning to Asteria. So soon? Roland looked toward the direction Elias had gone. Our prince has finished searching, and now it's time to go home. Adrian remained standing inside the bookstore long after Elias had disappeared. The bell above the door had long since fallen silent, yet its echo lingered in his mind. Marcus arrived only minutes later. He took one look at Adrian's expression and immediately knew something was wrong. You told him. Adrian didn't answer. Marcus sighed. And he left. Still no answer. Marcus slowly walked toward the window, watching the bustling streets outside. I've known you for 15 years. I've seen you return from wars. I've seen you wounded. I've even seen you stand before kings without fear. He turned to face his friend. But I've never seen you look broken. Adrian closed his eyes. I did the right thing. Marcus stared at him for several seconds. No. You did the easiest thing. Silence. You chose the future everyone else wanted. Marcus's voice softened. Instead of the future you wanted. Without another word, he walked away, leaving Adrian completely alone, outside the city. Elias sat quietly inside a modest carriage bearing no royal crest. Captain Roland rode beside him on horseback. Neither had spoken for nearly an hour. Finally, Roland broke the silence. Would you like me to inform their majesties before we arrive? Elias smiled faintly. They already know. The queen? A mother always knows. Roland couldn't argue with that. After another long stretch of silence, he asked carefully, Do you regret coming here? Elias looked out the window. Fields of wildflowers stretched endlessly beneath the afternoon sun. No. Not even after what happened? Elias shook his head. I came searching for someone who would love me before he knew I was a prince. His fingers tightened slightly around the silver signet ring resting in his palm. And I received my answer. Roland frowned. But the Duke clearly cares for you. He does. Then why leave? Elias's smile was gentle. Because love isn't enough if fear is stronger. Back in Raven's Hollow, Adrian wandered through the bookstore once more. The shelves looked exactly the same. The sunlight still poured through the windows. Mr. Rowan still dusted the old novels. Everything was unchanged, except the bookstore felt empty. Mr. Rowan quietly placed a freshly brewed cup of tea on the counter. He won't be coming back. Adrian looked at him. You knew? I suspected. The old bookseller smiled sadly. Elias was never ordinary. No. He was extraordinary. Mr. Rowan nodded. I didn't mean his birth. I meant his heart. Those words struck Adrian harder than he expected. The old man continued arranging books. You know, my wife once told me something. When love asks you to be brave, hesitation becomes regret. 3 days later, the royal palace of Asteria came into view. Golden towers shimmered beneath the morning light. Trumpets sounded from the castle walls. The gates slowly opened. King Alaric and Queen Celestia were already waiting in the courtyard. The moment Elias stepped from the carriage, his mother embraced him tightly. "My sweet boy, I'm home." She gently cupped his face. "You've been crying." Elias laughed softly. "I was hoping you wouldn't notice." "I'm your mother." "I notice everything." King Alaric placed a reassuring hand on his son's shoulder. "You don't have to explain anything today. There will be time for that later." Elias nodded gratefully. For the first time since leaving Ravenshollow, he allowed himself to stop pretending he was all right. That same evening, hundreds of miles away, a royal messenger arrived at Blackwood Manor. "Your Grace." Adrian accepted the sealed envelope. The wax bore the unmistakable crest of Asteria. His heartbeat quickened. Inside was a single invitation. His Majesty. King Alaric of Asteria requests the presence of Duke Adrian Blackwood at the royal palace in 7 days' time. No explanation, no reason, only an invitation. Marcus read over Adrian's shoulder. "Looks like someone knows exactly who you are." Adrian stared at the elegant handwriting. "It wasn't the king who invited me." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "What makes you think that?" Adrian smiled sadly. "Because there's only one person who still writes the letter E like this." He remembered watching Elias label books, the same elegant curve, the same careful strokes. Marcus folded his arms. "So? What are you going to do?" Adrian looked toward the dark horizon. For the first time since letting Elias walk away, his answer came without hesitation. "I'm going to Asteria." Marcus smiled. "And why is that?" Adrian's silver eyes reflected the setting sun. "Because this time, I'm choosing my heart, far away in the palace gardens." Elias stood beneath a blooming white tree, completely unaware that his story was not over. A gentle breeze carried flower petals through the air. One landed softly in his hand. His mother joined him with a knowing smile. "Do you think he'll come?" Elias looked toward the distant western sky. He remembered the bookstore, the quiet dinners, the way Adrian smiled without realizing it. Then he whispered, almost to himself, "I don't know. But if he does, I hope he comes for Elias, not for the prince, not for the crown, just Elias." 7 days later. The royal palace of Asteria stood beneath a brilliant morning sky. Sunlight reflected from white marble towers. Royal banners danced gently in the wind. Hundreds of knights lined the grand entrance. Servants hurried through the palace, preparing for the arrival of an important guest. Inside the throne room, King Alaric sat calmly upon the throne. Beside him, Queen Celestia watched the doors with quiet curiosity. "You invited him?" The king nodded. "I did." "And you didn't tell Elias?" "No." The queen smiled knowingly. "You enjoy testing people far too much. I enjoy discovering their true intentions." A servant entered and bowed deeply. "Your Majesties, Duke Adrian Blackwood has arrived." Outside, Adrian took a slow breath before stepping through the enormous palace doors. Everything around him reflected power. Towering columns, golden chandeliers, paintings of generations of kings. Yet none of it intimidated him. There was only one thing on his mind: Elias. A chamberlain guided him through several magnificent corridors before stopping before a pair of carved oak doors. "Their Majesties are waiting." The doors slowly opened. Adrian stepped forward before lowering himself into a respectful bow. "Your Majesty." King Alaric studied him for several long seconds. "So, the famous Duke Blackwood. I've heard much about you. I hope it was favorable." The king almost smiled. "That depends." He stood and slowly descended the steps leading from the throne. "You know who my son is now?" "I do. And yet you came." "I did." "Why?" Adrian answered without hesitation. Because I made the greatest mistake of my life. Silence filled the room. I convinced myself that my duty mattered more than the person fate chose for me. I thought protecting my house meant letting him go. He lowered his gaze. I was wrong. The Queen watched him carefully. And if Elias had truly been nothing more than a bookstore assistant? Adrian looked directly at her. My answer would be the same. I came here for Elias, not because he is a prince, but because he is the man I love. The Queen exchanged a glance with the king. Neither spoke for several moments. Finally, King Alaric nodded once. I believe you. Elsewhere in the palace, Elias knew nothing. He was helping the palace librarian organize a shipment of rare manuscripts. Some habits, he realized, never disappeared. A familiar laugh echoed through the library. The elderly librarian smiled. I was beginning to think I'd have to hide the books before Your Highness reorganized the entire collection. I make it better. You make it alphabetical. Exactly. Before either of them could continue, Captain Roland appeared in the doorway. Your Highness. Roland rarely interrupted him. Immediately, Elias knew something had happened. What is it? The king requests your presence. Now? Immediately. The throne room doors opened. Elias stepped inside. His eyes first found his parents. Then, they found Adrian. He froze. For several heartbeats. Neither of them moved. Adrian looked exactly as he remembered. The same silver eyes. The same calm expression. Only now, there was something different. Regret, hope, and determination. Elias. His voice was barely more than a whisper. You came. A small smile crossed Adrian's face. I promised myself. If I was ever given another chance, I wouldn't waste it. The room disappeared around them. It no longer mattered that kings, queens, ministers, and royal guards stood watching. Adrian walked toward him until only a single step remained between them. I owe you an apology. You owe yourself forgiveness first, Elias answered softly. Adrian shook his head. No. I hurt you. I allowed fear to speak louder than my heart. I told myself I was protecting everyone. But all I protected was my own pride. Elias remained silent. I don't deserve another chance, Adrian admitted. But if you'll allow it, I'd like to earn one. King Alaric folded his arms. Good. Both young men looked toward him. Because earning it is exactly what you'll have to do. Adrian straightened immediately. Your Majesty? The king smiled. You thought meeting a king would be the difficult part. He shook his head. Winning my son's heart again. That is the real challenge. Laughter spread through the throne room. Even Queen Celestia couldn't hide her smile. Elias laughed quietly for the first time in days. You heard my father. I did. Adrian smiled. So, may I begin by asking if you'll allow me to court you properly? Elias looked at him for a long moment, then, very slowly, he extended his hand. This time, no dukes, no princes, no politics, just Adrian. And Elias. Adrian gently took his hand. The moment their fingers intertwined, a warm, golden light surrounded them. The ancient mate bond, held back by fear and doubt, finally settled into perfect harmony. The light shimmered like thousands of tiny stars before fading into the air. Queen Celestia quietly wiped away a tear. I've waited a long time to see that. King Alaric placed an arm around her shoulders. So have I. Several months later. The little bookstore in Raven's Hollow welcomed two familiar visitors. The brass bell rang. Mr. Rowan looked up from behind the counter. His face lit up immediately. I was wondering when my favorite employee would finally come back. Elias laughed. I came to return a borrowed book. You borrowed 6. I returned 6. Mr. Rowan narrowed his eyes. I still think you're trying to steal my best customer, Adrian chuckled. I only buy books because of him. Exactly my point. The three of them laughed together. Nothing about the bookstore had changed. The shelves were still crowded, the windows still glowed with warm afternoon sunlight, and tucked away in the history section. Two names had quietly been written inside the cover of a well-loved book, Adrian Blackwood, Elias Aurelius. A reminder that sometimes destiny doesn't begin in a palace. It begins in the quietest place imaginable. A small bookstore, where a prince hid his crown and found the one person who finally saw his heart. The end.